Hey everyone, it's the Doom Dog, and I do believe it's time to take another dive into the Halo universe. Before we begin, I would like to remind you all that when I do these reviews, I am specifically looking at the campaign. I am not looking at the multiplayer. If I have complaints about things in the story not making much sense, and there is an explanation in a book, a comic, a movie, or a show, that should have been in the game to begin with. Players should not have to look to extended universe material for your story to make sense. Having said that, let's take a look at Halo 4. Last time I said that Halo Reach was the end of an era. It was the last game in the franchise developed by the original developers, Bungie. This game is also the end of an era, as it was the final Halo game released for the Xbox 360. Of course, it is also the beginning of an era, as this is the game where the Halo franchise changed hands and would be developed by a new company going forward. Microsoft has deep pockets. They had numerous options available to them when approaching the fourth mainline entry in the Halo franchise. They decided to form a new studio. They gathered some truly great talents from excellent studios such as Guerrilla Games, id Software, BioWare, Bethesda, and even some former Bungie employees, and created a new studio called 343 Industries, named after 343 Guilty Spark from the Halo trilogy. Halo 4 was not this studio's first project, however. They first got their feet wet developing a 7-part animated series called Halo Legends, and they developed the excellent Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition for the Xbox 360. They got their foot in the door before Bungie even left to start working on Destiny. I have not seen Legends, but the visual update to Combat Evolved is still gorgeous to this day, and it is my preferred way of playing the original game. When they were given the gargantuan task of creating the next main entry in the Halo series, they had one goal in mind. They wanted to humanize the Master Chief. They went into this with the idea of giving him more personality than he has ever had. Prior to this, he did speak in cutscenes, but he was never anything more than a vessel for the player to inhabit. He filled the same kind of role as Doom Guy or Gordon Freeman. This is a challenging task as you are messing with people's preconceived notions of who the Master Chief is. Did it work? Did Microsoft throwing money at a new studio to write a new Halo game work out in their favor? Let's take a look at Halo 4 and find out. The story of Halo 4 starts with half of the forward Unto Dawn floating around in deep space. It has been 4 years since the events of Halo 3, and the year is 2557. A bright orange light scans the ship, and you can hear a recording of Cortana sending out an SOS on repeat. She wakes up in a panic, and it seems like something is definitely wrong. She wakes Chief up saying she needs him. She turns on the anti-gravity, and Chief opens the pod. You need to head up to the observation deck 4 floors up. I like this opening to the game. It shows more emotional facial expressions from Cortana than we have ever seen before. From the very beginning, it plants this idea in your mind that this will be a more emotionally charged game than any of the previous ones. It works well. It builds an aura of mystery, but there is only one problem with it. This is not the opening scene of Halo 4. This is. This game opens with a scene of Catherine Halsey in handcuffs being interrogated about the Spartan program that she created. We learned that they take young children to train to be Spartans from the very beginning because the mind of a child is more susceptible to indoctrination than that of an adult. Spartans were created to quell human rebellions, but that was forgotten about when they proved very effective in combating the Covenant. Records do show mildly sociopathic behavior, but they are incredibly efficient on the battlefield. The person interrogating her says Chief is dead, but his file reads missing in action. When taken by itself, this is not a bad scene. It gives us the best and deepest look at the Spartans and how they are created that the series has ever given us. I do appreciate the lore here, don't get me wrong, but what does this have to do with the rest of the story? After this, Halsey has almost nothing to do with the game's story. The only times you find any mentions of her after this is when Chief says he wants to find her and in the data logs on the research station you visit. And those data logs are optional for the player to find. You could cut this opening scene right out of the game and it would change absolutely nothing. So why is it here? Anyway, right at the beginning of the game, there is a terminal that gives you a brief overview of the stories of the first 3 games. It helps catch up first-time players, which is a nice touch. Check the ship's various systems, including weapon systems. This will be important shortly. Chief has been in stasis for 4 years, 7 months, and 10 days. The light from the intro scans the ship again. The scan matches no known frequencies. The elevator door is sealed shut, and you have to pry it open. The elevator shaft has lost pressure, and you have to climb your way up it. When you reach the top, you get attacked by an elite. I guess we're fighting the Covenant again in this game? That war ended in Halo 3, so why are we fighting them again? Is this game ever going to tell us?
Nope.
Open the blast shield and you will see an entire Covenant fleet. Chief notes that they are not outfitted in standard military gear, which explains the changes in armor. The Covenant cruiser is on an intercept course and the weapon systems are online. I told you that would be important shortly. The ship was torn in half, so the only way to fire the remaining missiles is to do so from the outer hull. Cortana appears to glitch out while telling you where to fire the missile. You are orbiting a Forerunner planet. Try to launch the missile and it will jam. You need to fix that. Go to the blast door and unjam it, causing the missile to fire. It hits the Covenant cruiser and blows it up. An orange beam shoots from the planet and scans you, so it's not the Covenant doing that. The planet opens up and a gravity well starts to pull everything in. Run away and head to the vehicle bay. The nearest escape pod is there. The vehicle bay is depressurized as well, and you get pulled through the door despite Chief's best efforts to hang on. He is pulled out of the ship and into the gravity well. A piece of debris hits him and he blacks out. He wakes up sometime later on the planet's surface. I would question this, but Spartans have some unexplained ability to survive falls from orbit. You are surrounded by flaming wreckage. Cortana freaks out again. She tries to claim that she is fine, but Chief is not buying it. She says she was put into service 8 years ago and AIs start to deteriorate after 7. She is going through rampancy, something mentioned in Halo 3. She says there are other ships that have survived the gravity well, which is a good sign because you need a ride off this planet. Cortana picks up a faint transmission. She thinks it's not the Covenant. You leave the wreckage and get a good look at the planet for the first time. Watch. I love this moment. It's so good. It brings back the same feeling of wonder and mystery that I felt the very first time I ever stepped foot on the ring way back in Halo 1. Good work here, 343. I'm impressed. You run across some warthogs that survived the crash. Hop in one. If it had not set in earlier, it should now dawn on you that you are completely alone. Throughout the majority of the first 3 games, Chief had someone or something fighting by his side. The Arbiter, Johnson, Marines, Sentinels, something. Thus far, you have had nothing. And having no one on the gun of the Warthog really drives home this fact. It makes you feel isolated on this foreign planet. It's a good sense of atmosphere that feels rather unique for the series. Cortana hears that signal again, and it's stronger this time. You must be getting closer to it. You eventually come across a large open field, and you find groups of Covenant to fight. Go engage them. Cortana gets another signal, and Chief hears it this time. You come across some Sentinels. That makes sense, as the planet is Forerunner. You run across Forerunner writing that says, "Guardianship for all living things lies with those whose evolution is the most complete. The mantle of responsibility shelters all." You run across a cartographer. From it, you learn that this planet is called Requiem. It locks up, and you have to get it back online. After doing so, you hear the signal again. It's the UNSC ship called Infinity. The signal is not strong enough to reply. However, the cartographer suggests that the Infinity is in the middle of the planet, and it seems that the planet is hollow. There is a terminus that should allow you to reach the Infinity.
That can't be.
The Covenant are being ordered to the tower that you are headed to. You receive another transmission, and you can make out the word artifact. Head out to the top of the tower to reach the terminus. The terminus is part of a transit grid that spans the entire planet. It lets you use portals to transport from one place to another. You come across the Forerunner symbol for Reclaimer, humanity. The Chief figures that that is where the Infinity is, and he tells Cortana to set a destination to it. Robot-looking creatures start appearing all around you. They surround you, and the portal opens. Chief jumps into it as they start to approach. Cortana says that they are some sort of advanced defense AI. You are at the core of the planet. The satellite at the center is amplifying the signal like a relay. Infinity is not here. You cannot respond without shutting down the 2 towers that have been causing interference. Cortana opens a portal to the first tower. Go through it. You encounter a new enemy that resembles a metallic dog. They are connected to the creature that you saw in the terminus. You encounter that creature in the tower. When the enemies explode, there is a data purge. The large bipedal ones are called Promethean Knights. You get another transmission from the Infinity, but the interference is worse. It is gargled. Your screen goes distorted. Cortana says that it is her. Something about moving through the portals is being harsh on her systems, and she says that she will be alright. You get another transmission from Infinity. You can make out just enough to gather that they are orbiting the planet. You can make out forward unto dawn, so they are aware of your presence and are at risk of getting trapped in the gravity well that crashed you here. Shut down the first beam and the signal will clear up some. You cannot respond and must shut down the second tower though. Head through the portal and go to the second pylon. The Covenant drop in and the Prometheans fight against them. I guess they aren't friendly with each other. You receive yet another transmission from Infinity. It is gargled again. You are getting close to the second beam. The Infinity contacts you yet again. They definitely know that you are here, but you cannot respond. They are getting closer to the planet to get a clearer signal. This definitely isn't good. That increases the risk of them getting caught up in the gravity well. take the beam down. You still cannot respond, so head through the new portal. You come across a central point to get a better broadcast back to the Infinity. There's a giant floating ball in front of you, but you do not have much time. The Infinity has discovered the gravity well, touched the pillars to open communication. Noise starts emitting from the giant ball, and it starts moving. Chief tells Cortana to find an exit. Someone or something comes out of the ball, and armor forms around him. He makes the Chief's cover disappear and lifts him up into the air, frozen in place. He mentions the Librarian, who was previously mentioned in the terminals in Halo 3. If you did not get those, you are probably lost right about now. And no, that terminal at the beginning makes no mention of her. The Prometheans in the Covenant bow to him, and he says that mankind has not obtained the mantle. He says that there was a time where he was your ally, but now he's not. He says that the Forerunners have returned, so he must be a Forerunner. I guess that means the Librarian is a Forerunner as well. That bastard led you here so you could free him.
What an asshole!
A slip space rupture occurs. You need to escape immediately. Cortana refers to him as the Didact, which is the other being mentioned in the Halo 3 terminals. Again, if you did not get those, you are probably very lost right about now. He is escaping. Grab a ghost and escape as well. Cortana uses your shields to overpower it and speed it up. You get an emergency broadcast from Infinity. They are caught up in the gravity well and are being pulled inside. Contain your shock. Jump through the portal, escape, and land on the other side near a cliff. Chief jumps off just before the ghost goes over. The Infinity crashes right down over your head, and Cortana tracks its descent to 77 kilometers north. The Didact ship flies up behind it, and he flies off. You find yourself in the thick of the jungle, and the Didact is scanning the Infinity off in the distance. I guess we now know who was scanning us at the beginning of the game. An officer named Lasky contacts you, but the signal is bouncing in and out. Time to track him down through the jungle. The Infinity did not receive the distress call from Lasky. You come across dead Marines, but none of them are him. There is a rather large fog in the jungle, and you find a new armor ability called Promethean Vision that lets you see through the fog. You find another tag. There is an audio recording that suggests that Lasky was here recently. Why is this area full of enemies then? You come across another tag, but there is no body this time. The door behind you opens, and you finally come across a few humans. Lasky is one of them. And there is another Spartan named Palmer. I guess they made more after Chief disappeared. The main trilogy kind of made it seem like Chief was the only one left. Lasky was sent on a scouting mission while Infinity is under attack by the Didact, and a lot of his squad is wounded. He needs Chief to clear a landing zone so they can be picked up for evacuation. Lasky contacts you. There are reports of officers pinned down near you. Go help them out. You come across a locked door. Insert Cortana into the panel to open it. There's a cave system on the other side with an opening large enough for an LZ. Hold off the Covenant while Cortana gets to the open door. Chief asks Cortana how close she is, and she freaks out and gives an angry reply to him. After unlocking the door, she apologizes to Chief, and Chief says that it's alright. She insists that it's not. The Covenant seem to be working with the Prometheans now. I guess that all changed when they bowed to the Didact? Was that alone enough to form an alliance? Otherwise, we didn't see this happening. They just aren't enemies now. You contact Lasky and let him know that you secured an LZ. A hostile force is trying to gain access to the Infinity Bridge. You are taken to a spot near it to fight off the Covenant on board the ship. You make it to the ship, and a giant elevator takes you up inside. Fight off enemies within. The captain, a man named Andrew Del Rio, contacts you. The ship's defenses are down and the didact is extracting data from it. You need to sever that connection. To do so, you need to get to the hull of the ship. There is a giant mech vehicle called a Mantis. Take it and use it. Lasky contacts you. There are Covenant jamming devices on the hull. Destroy them and the Infinity defenses should come back online. Activate the cannons to attack the didact ship and he flies away. The Infinity lifts back off the ground. The captain wants to know what the Prometheans are. They have not come across anything like them on any of the other installations. It turns out the Infinity's job was to locate the remaining Halo rings. While visiting one of them, they discovered a Forerunner artifact and left it in the hands of a research team on the station near the ring. A science team was killed retrieving it, and the data extracted from it led the Infinity to this planet. The Infinity is leaving, and Chief objects. He wants to go after the didact. To leave, you need to do something about the gravity well. There are particle cannons that you need to take out on your way to the controls for it. Sarah Palmer contacts you and says Lasky is waiting ahead. Climb up to the top of the mammoth and talk to Lasky. You need to manually bring down a couple of particle cannons before you can push through to the command center. Palmer suggests grabbing a jetpack. Captain Del Rio gives the go-ahead and you're off. The first cannon takes down your ships and you need to get to the crash site and retrieve a target locator for the Mac Blast. Pick it up and use it to fire the cannons. Drive back onto the Mammoth. There's a force field ahead and you need to destroy 3 power sources to take it down. Shut them down and return to the Mammoth. Use the target locator to take out the second cannon. The Covenant attack and disable the Mammoth, and you need to fend them off to protect it. Take the grav lift inside the Covenant ship and take it out. Escape and head back to the Mammoth. Cortana has another anger outburst. She says she is putting Chief's life at risk and she cannot control herself. Chief says that it's okay, and she says that it's not, explaining that rampancy is basically her thinking herself to death. Cortana is dying. Chief insists that he will not let it happen. The command outpost is ahead, and you need to continue on foot. Upon entering the outpost, you lose contact with the Infinity. The planet really seems to fuck with the radio transmissions, doesn't it? The Sentinels seem to be guiding you toward the gravity well controls, and it might be a trap. Cortana shuts down the guns and she seems to disappear. The Sentinels lead you down another path where Cortana is waiting. This is where Chief meets the Librarian. Oh boy, this scene. We need to talk about this scene. I will discuss the problems with this scene more later on when I talk about what is good and bad about the story, but this one single 4 to 5 minute long scene is the biggest problem with this game's storytelling. If you felt confused by this game's plot, like you did not know what was going on, this is why. The Librarian explains a ton of things in a short 4 to 5 minutes here, so let's go through all of it. She wants to aid humanity on their path to the mantle of responsibility, but humanity's obtaining it is at risk. The didact wants to leave Requiem, and you need to stop him. He seeks a Forerunner weapon called the Composer. It will allow him to contain the greatest enemy the Forerunners ever faced, humanity. Mankind spread among the stars, killing everything within their path. The didact and the Forerunner stopped them, only to discover that humanity was actually running from the flood. The Forerunners made plans for a final great journey. That is the rings, and it's why the Covenant called it the Great Journey. They misinterpreted what it was. The didact did not want to give up the mantle of responsibility. He wanted to save the galaxy from the flood. The composer absorbs biological life and rebuilds it in a new form that cannot be infected by the flood, the Prometheans. The composer failed to rebuild them as biological creatures, however, but the didact did not let that stop him. He used the composer on humanity, so the Prometheans that you have been fighting this entire time are human beings remade by the composer. The Librarian took the composer from the didact and imprisoned him here. He left what was left of humanity on Earth to grow as a species in hopes that they would take up the mantle. The Librarian indexed mankind for repopulation. She hid the seeds from the didact. You are the culmination of thousands of lifetimes of careful planning. After explaining all of this, the didact finds you. The Librarian accelerates the Chief's evolution and makes him immune to the composer, among other things. It's time to leave. Retrieve Cortana. She notes that your bio readings are different. The Librarian filled her in on what the didact is after. Infinity cannot get a lock on to destroy the gravity well, as there is too much air traffic. You need to use the target locator to help them. Use it to take out the gravity well. It explodes, and you can leave the planet. You are trying to convince the captain to go after the didact instead, and he is not buying it. Lasky speaks up on your behalf, and Cortana has another anger outburst. The captain orders Lasky to retire her. Before he can grab her, Chief does. The captain orders Chief to hand over Cortana, and he refuses. He orders that they arrest Chief. Chief says to send warning to the research station that the didact is coming, and he walks off. Before it is all over, promise me you'll figure out which one of us is the machine. Lasky asks your plan, and Chief says that he is planning to jump ship and go after the didact. Lasky was sent here to prevent you from leaving. Instead, he prepared a pelican for you to chase after the didact with. You are going to try to prevent the didact from leaving. I'm really warming up to this Lasky guy. He seems like a good dude. Climb in the Pelican and take off on the ship. After 5 games, you finally get to fly the Pelican. The didact ship is directly in front of you, and there is a shield surrounding it. You need to lower that in order to get to him. There are 2 towers acting as traffic control for resources to it. Disrupt communications from them to it, and Cortana will forge an override code to lower the defenses. There are so many transmissions passing through the first tower that Cortana cannot isolate the one that she needs quickly enough, destroy the attenuates to flood the system and overload it. After doing so, the didact talks to the Chief and taunts him. Cortana cannot hear him. How odd. Head to the second tower. This one is very different from the first. The source of the data is a carrier wave generator on the other side. Find a way across. Cortana is going to use your shield like an EMP, just like you did in Halo 1. Just step into it. The didact taunts you again. Cortana still cannot hear him. Enter the carrier wave and disable it. Fight your way back out of the tower. All transmissions between the tower and the satellite have ceased. The didact taunts you a 3rd time, and he mentions that the composer is near the 3rd ring in the care of humans. If you have not figured it out yet, the artifact that the Infinity found on the ring was the composer. He says you cannot prevent his departure, and he knows what you're trying to do. Cortana has a plan. She wants to reposition the defense spires to block the didact from leaving. The spires are being controlled from the tower, and the didact alters the tower to try to stop you. Put Cortana into the spire controls, and she has another freak out. They're getting worse. That is concerning. Is Chief even going to have enough time to save Cortana? The didact is leaving. Chief tells her to track the Covenant liches. He jumps down onto the first of them. He climbs up on it, and the didact ship drops into a much larger ship. Requiem opens up, and he jumps into slip space. The Chief hangs onto the outer hull of the Covenant ship as it jumps with the didact. You emerge on the other side at a research station near Installation 3. Chief boards the ship and takes out the crew. He contacts the station. They are under attack by the Covenant. Cortana loses it again, and it causes the ship to crash into the hangar bay. You wake up from it later on, and Chief tells the doctor in charge that she needs to evacuate. The Covenant have taken over the landing base, preventing anyone from leaving. You need to go deal with them. Raise the emergency barricade to keep the Covenant from coming in. The didact is scanning the station for the composer. You meet up with the lead scientist of the station. Her name is Tilson. Chief tells her about the didact and that he wants the artifact they found. It is very large, and she is convinced that it cannot be removed from the station. She gives Cortana access to the station's supply manifest. Cortana discovers bombs that can destroy the composer and the station. If you cannot move it to prevent the didact from getting it, you will have to destroy it. Tilson will make sure that the nukes are primed for remote detonation. You hear a giant explosion. The Covenant destroyed the first evac shuttle. Cortana suggests turning on the station's defense turret to protect the evac shuttles. If you are under attack by the Covenant and you are trying to launch escape pods to get away from them, why was this not already on? Turning them on seems obvious to me. Not doing so just strikes me as dumb. Dr. Tilson sends you out to activate them. Do so, and Dr. Tilson is working on the nuke right now.
Dr. Tilson, are you there?
The Covenant found the composer. Hop in a Mantis and fend them off with it. After doing so, get on the elevator and ride to the cargo base. The didact found the composer, and he has started to lift it right out of the station. I guess his ship is powerful enough to lift it by itself, but humanity does not have one here that can do it. Cortana is losing it as you try to get her to find Dr. Tilson. She eventually gets it together and does find her. You tell Tilson that the didact has the composer and that you need to evacuate the station. Then, this happens.
Wait. Something's happening.
Cortana, can you access the station's defense systems?
They're not responding.
Cortana!
Chief, it's...
Just... holy shit. This is one of the most shocking scenes in the entire series. You fought your ass off to try to save these people, and now they're all gone. 343 lets the horror of what just happened sink in after that, and they decide not to score the aftermath. That is a very nice touch that makes it that much more powerful. Cortana says that they will pair Chief with another AI. She is guilt-ridden and heartbroken over what just happened.
Okay?
She prepares a broadsword. You load the nuke onto it and take off. You fly the ship out to the didact ship, and he jumps into slip space. You fly up under his shields and stay there as you start to search for an entrance to the ship. Infinity contacts you and Lasky is in charge now. It seems that the higher-ups were none too happy with Del Rio's actions toward Chief. Lasky will send out short-range fighters to engage the Didact. The Didact closes off the entrance to his ship. Infinity will punch a hole in the side of it, but you need to take out the cannons first, so he can get a clean shot. Do so, and Infinity fires at the ship. It creates a hole in it. Chief flies into it and crashes on the other side. Does Chief ever fly a ship without crashing it? He grabs the nuke. You are lucky that that thing did not go off in the crash. Chief needs to deploy the warhead manually.
Now what do we do?
Okay, why? What happened to the remote detonation? Cortana is frustrated with herself because for the first time she does not know what to do. Cortana guides you to an elevator shaft that Chief falls down. She catches you just before you hit the bottom. I am not sure how though. She detects an energy signature. Place her on the pedestal and she opens a portal for you. The Didact knows she is in the system. Cortana is fighting with him to maintain control. She cannot control what her processes are doing. You wind up in a room where weapons are being stored, and it contains the only gravity hammer in the game.
What about the Didact?
The birds are not part of this Covenant force, so where the hell did he get
Try
that?
to move you to the composer.
Hold off the Didact's forces while Cortana locates the composer. She takes control of the cannons to help you out. Retrieve Cortana from the system and head to the portal she just opened. Hit the ramp. The low gravity carries you through to the other side. After the warhead is primed, the window for escape will be slim. The Didact starts to power up the composer, and he shields himself from you. You need to disable the beam. Cortana ejects part of herself over to the shield. You need to do this multiple times from multiple points to overload it and get to the Didact. Reach the second pedestal. Cortana does it again. The Didact ship is within range of Earth. Put Cortana in the next pedestal. She does it a third time, and she screams. It's taking a toll on her. The Didact fires the composer at the planet, and he destroys the pedestal. Cortana seemingly disappears with it. You can hear her voice after this, though, seemingly directing you. Get on the elevator up to the light bridge. The Didact says that you persist too long after your own defeat. He comes down to face you, and he suspends you in mid-air, unable to move. Over the edge of the bridge, he calls humanity's imprisonment in the composer a kindness. The different fragments of Cortana surround him, and she says that he will not mind her returning the favor. The fragments grab him and hold him down, and Chief falls and grabs the ledge. Chief climbs back up and charges the Didact. He places a grenade on him. It blows up. He falls over the edge. This is anticlimactic for a final confrontation with the Didact, but I'm not sure how else to do this since the Chief is way outmatched here. He crawls toward the bomb and arms it and detonates it. As it explodes, Chief appears in a digital realm. Cortana is here with him. She approaches him and reaches out and touches him, saying she has wanted to do that forever. She shielded him from the bomb, which is never really explained. The bomb destroyed the composer and the ship both. Most of her was destroyed along with it. She held back just enough energy to get you off the ship somehow. I guess howls are less important here than the emotion of this scene. She is not coming with you this time. She disappears, essentially dying, and I'm not going to lie to you. This is the single most emotionally powerful scene in the Halo series, and one of the most in any first-person shooter ever made. This hits me hard every single time I play it. Cortana gets a meaningful and impactful death with a beautiful and emotional final scene. 343 did very good work here. Chief is floating around in the vacuum of space when the ship approaches him and finds him. They pull him in. He survived somehow. You are on the deck of the Infinity looking over Earth. Lasky joins you. He talks about his history. He grew up on a colony called New Harmony. He went to the academy, and he did not see Earth until he was an adult. He still thinks of it as home. Chief says, our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity whatever the cost. Lasky says, you say that like soldiers and humanity are two different things, but they aren't. Soldiers are people. He decides to let you have the deck to yourself. Chief mentions that Cortana said that to him once about being a machine. After the credits roll, you see the devastation that the composer caused as the rest of humanity picks back up. You get a monologue of the didact. He seems to be pleading his case to a court of some kind. He says that the mantle of responsibility belongs to Forerunners alone. He says that the reclamation has already begun and that they are helpless to stop it. What did he mean by this? Is it possible for a game to have both the best writing in a series and the worst? It seems contradictory, I know, but that's the sense I get from this game. Out of all of the games in the series I have reviewed thus far, it has the best and worst writing. How is that possible? Well, allow me to explain. Let's start with the bad first. Remember when I was discussing the scene where Chief meets the Librarian? Well, it's time to get back to that. The single biggest story failing in this game is this cutscene. And it's the worst cutscene in the entire series up to this point. If the plot of Halo 4 went over your head and you had no clue what the hell was going on in this game, this scene was the single biggest reason why. This sequence commits the single biggest sin of storytelling. Show, do not tell. This scene does the exact opposite. It tells you instead of showing you. It is a 4 to 5 minute long exposition dump that dumps a lot of information in your lap all at once, and it went right over the head of many of a player as a direct result. I know it did mine when I first played this game. I had no clue who or what the hell was going on with the didact, the composer, the Prometheans, and the Librarian. It is all further complicated by the fact that this is the single most important cutscene in the game. It tells you who the Prometheans are. It tells you who the didact is, what the composer is, what it does. It tells you what the didact wants to do, and it gives you a reason why Chief survives the composer later on in this game. Everything in this game revolves around this one scene, and if it goes over your head, you will be lost. This is not the fault of the player. The story of the Prometheans, the didact, the Librarian, and the composer is not all that complex. It's just poorly told, because it is done through one brief exposition dump. It's a relatively quick scene for how much information that it throws at you. It's the most important scene in the game, and the storytellers at 343 really dropped the ball. Ultimately, it is a shame that this pivotal scene is handled so poorly, because the main story of the didact, the composer, the Librarians, and the Prometheans is an interesting one. You get a lot of good lore and backstory on who the Forerunners are, and exactly why humanity are the Reclaimers. It's also not like the team behind this game was incapable of telling the story in an interesting way, because they literally do. If you get the terminals in this game, you get a greatly expanded version of the story that the Librarian tells you, and it tells it in a much better and much easier to understand way. You should not need to get the terminals to understand the main story, though. That is the single biggest failing that the story has, but it is not the only one. The main campaign never attempts to explain who these Covenant are, why they are here, or why they are attacking you when the war with them ended in the previous main entry in the series. There is an explanation for this, though, and it is tied to a side series included with Halo 4, a co-op mode called Spartan Ops. There is a terminal related to Spartan Ops that tells you who the Covenant are. Once again, this should have been in the main game. I already discussed the opening scene of the game, but I will give it mention here. The opening scene of this game has Dr. Halsey, who we saw in Halo Reach, being interrogated about the Spartan program. It gives you good information on the program and how it works, but it does not tie into the rest of the game at all. Halsey only gets mentioned a few times throughout this game, and she never appears outside of this scene. Why then is this scene here? You could cut it out entirely without changing how the story plays out. Beyond that, a lot of the new characters really are not all that great. The Didact only becomes a better villain when you get the terminals and understand his story. Until you do, he might as well be just an object in your way. Captain Del Rio seems to have no personality outside of being an asshole to the Chief because Cortana freaks out. He gets his just rewards when he gets demoted, but he still is not a great character. He seems like he is only here to add more drama and nothing else. Sarah Palmer is entirely pointless to this story as well. She does not do anything at all in this game. What is her purpose? Is it just to let you know that the Spartan program exists after the war? If you had cut her from this game, it would change nothing. The new characters are not all bad, though. Tilson has some personality to her, though I think that was more about how good her acting was than her actual in-game dialogue. Still, there is enough there to make it hurt that much more when the Didact uses the composer on the station, though. Now, Lasky I do like. Much like the characters such as Johnson from the previous games, he is not the most in-depth character in the world, but he is memorable. He is a noble officer with a good sense of right and wrong, and he is not afraid to stand up to his superiors to do what is right. He is easily the best of the new characters. As for the Didact and the Librarian, they are extensions of ideas and characters that were introduced specifically in the terminals of Halo 3. If you never got those, you will probably be a little lost when they are introduced. This is not a huge problem, as knowledge of Halo 3's terminals is not absolutely necessary to grasp enough to understand the story here, but it helps. You should not rely on terminals from previous games to understand the story in this one. Okay, so the scene with the Librarian is the worst scene in the series at this point because it commits a cardinal sin of storytelling, but I said that this had some of the best writing in the series as well. Remember way back at the beginning when I said 343 Industries' goal with this game was to explore Chief as a person and the relationship with Cortana? Yeah, about that. Halo 4 is telling two stories at once. The Didact is only one of them. The other is Cortana is dealing with rampancy and how Chief deals with it. Cortana is dying. Chief has dealt with death before, but he has never dealt with someone that is this close to him dying. How does the Chief deal with this? This might be a sin to some fans, but the Chief is not the silent protagonist he once was in this game. He has a lot more dialogue in Halo 4 than he has ever had before, where he previously talked but filled the same kind of role as a character like Link or your character in an Elder Scrolls or Fallout game. He is much more of his own character here. This game is all about exploring who Chief really is as a person, and you will learn a lot about him and how he deals with Cortana slowly losing it over the game. It does a very good job humanizing him. And you also get a sense that he is struggling to maintain his usual stoic demeanor as his world seemingly falls apart around him. He struggles between his sense of duty and honor and emotions tearing him up inside. Cortana is handled better in this game than in any previous game too. She is fighting to maintain control over her processes and functions as her rampancy slowly gets worse over the course of the game. The deeper you get into this game, the more frequent and worse her rampancy becomes, and you can't help but feel for her as you watch this character that you have enjoyed over the course of the past 3 games fall apart before your very eyes. It all culminates in her death, and her death is the single most emotionally impactful scene in the entire series. It is also one of the most emotionally impactful scenes in any FPS that I have ever played, and I have played a fucking lot of them.
Cortana, do you read?
It does not quite reach the level of something like the boss in Metal Gear Solid 3, but it is a very good and heartbreaking scene. She got a good death. She got to go out fighting to save humanity and the Chief himself, and she got to have one last touching moment with him before finally passing away. I'll never forget the first time I saw it, and it still hits me every single time I replay this game. The Chief and Cortana stuff is the best writing the series has ever had, but the Didact stuff really holds it back. It really does have the best and worst storytelling in the series up to this point. And it's a shame. It does not have to. The Forerunner's story is an interesting one, and it's poorly told. When you get the terminals, you realize that it did not have to be. With better storytelling, both halves of this game's narrative could have been great. How does it look then? Well, you've been looking at this entire time, right? It's fucking gorgeous! 343 Industries worked miracles with the Xbox 360 hardware with this game, because this is absolutely one of the best looking games on that platform. Halo Reach was a big leap over Halo 3, and this is a big leap over Reach. It is crammed full of detail. I absolutely love it, and it still holds up extremely well 8 years later. When you get up close to textures, it will betray their age. They blur a bit, and you will note that this is a 7th gen game. For the most part, your time spent playing this game, though, you will not be doing this. It will still impress, but it is worth noting that yes, it can look a bit dated in this regard. As usual, they were limited in what they could do with the resolution and anti-aliasing. To give this game a smoother look, you will notice jaggies here and there. But this is pretty par for the course for the 7th generation game. Halo Reach did have a couple of bigger problems with its visuals though. It could look rather blurry or choppy in motion with bad ghosting issues. And I'm glad to say that this has been cleared up for this release. Furthermore, Halo Reach did not run amazingly well. By some miracle, Halo 4 does run better on the exact same hardware. This holds 30 FPS a lot of the time. It is not perfect, but it feels smoother to play on the 360 than Reach ever did, which is nice. There is a lot said about Halo 4's art style, and for the most part I do like it. I know that this is a point of contention for a lot of fans, but it just looks like Halo, with more detail to me. For the most part, at least. What is so wrong with that? This is the one thing that I have never understood with the Halo fandom. Why is it bad to add more detail into your graphics? This game still looks like Halo. It just looks like Halo with more detailed textures. And I do not see that as a bad thing. That is not to say that everything is good. The shotgun in this game looks pretty goofy in my opinion. I have never particularly cared for the look of it, and I have never been able to pinpoint exactly why. I guess it just looks over-designed. Furthermore, what the hell is up with the Marines in this game? Look at this. Does this look like a Marine to you? It definitely does not to me. Why doesn't this armor have some sort of camouflage on it or something to make it look more militaristic? They stand out like a sore thumb among a bunch of various art decisions in this game. I love the look of Requiem itself. I mentioned earlier that its big reveal gave me The same sense of wonder that I got when I first set foot on Halo 1. And this is true. However, it does not stop there. The idea of a hollow planet that you travel on the inside of is such a cool concept. I love it. You can look up at numerous points in this game and see the outer shell above you because you are inside of it, and it is so fucking cool. There are tons of Forerunner structures in this game as well, and they look beautiful and awe-inspiring. I fucking love them all. They are impressive with their sheer size and scope. It gives the kind of sense of scale that Forerunner structures should give you. And they have the same alien, otherworldly vibe to them. I also love the way that these were lit. The lighting in these structures is beautiful, and it really adds to the effect. It really helps bring back the wonderful sense of exploration that the best moments of this series have. The Forerunner structures in this game are honestly remind me of Mass Effect, and that is a good thing. This game comes with a new faction called the Prometheans too. These guys definitely have a uniform look to them, with them all being metallic robot creatures. They look unique from any previous faction in the series, as they should. The Knights have large armor that can open up and reveal what appears to be a battle skull underneath. Design-wise, though, they are my least favorite of the three. The Watchers have these cool circular wings on their back that really stand out, and the Crawlers resemble robot dogs. I don't know, man. Something about dogs just appeals to me. Of course, there is a new set of weapons in this game as well. They have unique and otherworldly designs to them that have the same kind of mechanical stylings that the Prometheans themselves have. They have their own cool animations as well, and it's a very nice touch. I like the look of the new weapons quite a bit. The art design is not perfect. Some of the changes, such as the look of the soldiers, seem like changes for the sake of changes. They seem unnecessary, and they serve to make something already good looking look worse. But there's a lot of art design in this game that I find beautiful or awe-inspiring as well. Mostly I'm impressed. I love how detailed everything is. I love how gorgeous everything is. I love exploring Requiem because the art is awesome and inspired for the planet. You did good work here, 343 Industries. How about the sound design? Listen to these weapons. Holy shit. Did you hear that? That sounds fucking amazing. The weapons in this game sound extremely powerful. This has the best weapon audio of any game in the series up to this point. All of the weapons are still recognizable as being from this series, but there is so much more power there than ever before. I absolutely love everything about it. Great work, 343. Outside of this, the rest of the sound design is very good as well. The grunts tend to ramble more incoherently, and the elites have a deeper and rougher voice than before. I think the idea behind this was to make them seem more fanatical than before. After all, Chief does mention this in the first mention of the game. Explosions sound powerful, the engine of the Warthog has a real rumble to it, and the environmental sound effects are excellent and really pull you into the world. Who was the audio director that brought this top-notch audio design to life? Okay, and what did he work on? Oh! That makes sense then. Every previous game employed Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore to compose the music for them. Those two made big names for themselves in the industry, with some of the best soundtracks that it has to offer. Replacing them is basically an impossible task. and anyone that tries is going to be replaced under a microscope and examined to a probably unfair degree. It's like the filling in the shoes of Nobuo Uematsu in scoring a Final Fantasy game. You are not going to get something that matches the classics. Having said that, this game does have 2 new composers. Who did 343 Industries get to replace industry legends? Well, this is the first guy. He is a composer best known for his work with a band called Massive Attack. I have not heard their work before, but there are always 2. Who is the other guy? And what is he known for? Okay. He's worthy. Now that we know who wrote the music of Halo 4, how is it? It's different. The soundtrack for this game really goes out of its way to set itself apart from the previous games. It definitely takes some getting used to for fans of the series. I will absolutely say that much. It sounds nothing like any previous soundtrack, and it seems 343 went in with the idea of letting you know that this is a new era for the series. It sets a tone that this game is going to be a bit different, and that's fine. It's Halo under a new developer. I will say this though, the first time that I played through Halo 4, I was not wild about the soundtrack. I couldn't recall many individual tracks, and nothing about it necessarily stood out to me. This could be partially my own fault because I had a general idea of what to expect from a Halo soundtrack, and I did not get it in 4. I could have just been disappointed because the music is not what I had come to expect from the series, instead of the actual quality of the music itself. When I played through it a second time via the Master Chief Collection, however, it clicked. I saw what they were going for, and it worked. There is a lot of great stereo effects in this game's music, and there is a lot of ambience and atmospheric pieces as well as a lot of emotional stuff. I'm not going to say that this is as good as the classics from the first 5 games, but it's very good in its own right. If you didn't get into it the first time like I did, I would encourage you to play through it with headphones. I like this soundtrack quite a lot, and I don't consider it a disappointment now so much as I just think it's different. What about the voice acting? The game has an emotional storyline at its core, and pulling that off really requires good performances from the characters. As usual, the voice acting for this game is good. It's always good in this series. Both Jen Taylor and Steve Downes really step up their game here. This is the best performance that they have ever given as Cortana and Chief. They have always been good in these roles, but they really transcend just that in this game. It really sells the emotional core. The voice cast and 343 Industries once again did excellent work here. How does it play then? Well, fighting the Covenant is the same as it ever has been. They have good enemy AI, and they are still fun to fight. It's back to basics in this game though, as you are fighting the same groups of enemies that you fought in Halo 1. Grunts, Jackals, Elites, Hunters. There are no brutes or drones in this game, and no, there is never an explanation as to why this is. What makes fighting the Covenant more fun though is the weapon feel. This game has the best weapon feel of the entire series, and is largely tied to how the guns sound. They sound more powerful than ever before, and it really gives you a good sense of power in combat that puts the gameplay over the top. Fighting the Covenant has never felt better because firing the weapons has never felt better. Weapons in this game are an absolute blast to fire. This game has all the various gameplay styles that you have come to expect from the series. You will fight on foot for some of the game as usual, but Halo's excellent vehicle sections are here too. They handle just as well as they did in the previous games, and they are still a blast to use. You get flying sections too, and they are also quite a bit of fun. There are turrets that you can use as well. And you can do the usual Halo thing and detach the turret from its base and carry it with you if you wish. The game does not see the return of dual wielding though, and I find this disappointing. Dual wielding was one of the best things about Halo 2 and 3, so why can't I have it back? It's been gone since ODST. Maybe I should quit expecting it to be here, but I thought it might make a return after us moving back to the mainline games after it being gone for the 2 side games. Do Bungie and 343 both hate this feature or something? Bring it back already! Sprint makes a return in this game. It has been moved from an armor ability to a permanent ability this time around. You can sprint anywhere at any time. And this is a point of contention for a lot of people. I do not understand why. Maybe I can see it be a problem in the multiplayer, but in the single player, it just makes sense that a soldier would be able to move quickly on the battlefield. When I go back to 1, 2, 3, and ODST, I do miss this feature. I wish it had a dedicated button though, instead of holding down the thumbsticks. What's new then? Well, a lot of shit is new actually. As previously mentioned, you get a new faction to fight, the Prometheans. They come in 3 varieties. There are the Knights, who are the Promethean equivalent of the Elites. They can carry weapons and shoot at you from range and teleport. There are the Crawlers. They are dog-looking enemies, and they are the fastest of the new factions. They are easy to take down. They attack in packs, and they can crawl on walls. Then there are the Watchers. They can fly, and they tend to hide behind enemies. They cast shields on enemies and resurrect them. They can also toss grenades back at you. Development of this game was not always smooth sailing, as the Knight went through multiple iterations before they were finalized. 343 spent so much time perfecting the Knight and making them fun to fight that they did not have much time to play test the Watchers. The Knights and the Crawlers are both fun to fight, and I think they did well with their behavior and designs. The Watchers though? Yeah, the Watchers are a problem. These are, without a doubt, the single most annoying enemies to deal with in this game. They usually do not even get close enough to you to attack you. They just hang out behind enemies and cast shields on them. They fly back and forth and can be a pain in the ass to take down. If you do not have some sort of longer range weapon, like a sniper rifle or a Covenant carbine, they are a pain to take out because the assault rifle and shotgun are unreliable at longer distances. Sometimes they will just plain fly off out of sight, leaving you to try to figure out where they went while fending off the enemies. These guys needed more playtesting. They are not nearly as bad as the Flood are, but that does not mean that they are good. They certainly aren't. The Covenant get their own new vehicle called the Lich. It is a large deployment air vehicle capable of dropping off more soldiers than the Phantom can. You never get the opportunity to fly one though. The UNSC have a new vehicle as well. It's a mech called the Mantis, and I fucking love this thing. There are 2 open areas in this game where you are given this thing, and you get to stomp on Covenant, machine gun them, and fire missiles to your heart's content. It is so much fun to drive. Defending the research station from the composer is absolutely one of the best moments in this game. Speaking of the vehicle sections, there is a new type of on-rails section where you are flying a broadsword. It happens in the final level in the game as you are staying below the Didact's shields and trying to find a way into his ship. It plays out like a Star Fox level. If that does not sound awesome to you, check your pulse, you might be dead. It's cool as fuck, and I love it. The UNSC and the Covenant both have new submachine gun type weapons. The UNSC has a gun called the SAW, which has a drum mag. It's basically a more accurate assault rifle. It's a lot of fun. The Covenant have something called a storm rifle. Of course, it runs on a battery, and you have to find a new weapon when that's drained off. It overheats. They're both fun to use. The UNSC have a couple of new explosive weapons, too. The first of these is the railgun. This takes a few seconds to charge before firing an explosive round that pretty much insta-kills anything that is not a hunter. It's fun to use, but the real fun one is the sticky detonator. I wish you got this thing more often in the game because it is so much fun. It shoots an explosive device that sticks to the ground, a wall, or an enemy, and you blow it up on command. You can use it for setting traps or taking out groups of enemies, and it is my favorite new weapon in this game. A new faction means a lot of new guns. The Prometheans have a variety of unique looking weapons for you to play with over the course of the game. The suppressor is the most common of these, and it will be the one that you use the most. It is basically an assault rifle. The scatter shot is a powerful short-range weapon that works similarly to a shotgun. It even has a similar reload animation, with Chief inserting shells into the gun. The bolt shot is a pistol. It does have a charged shot similarly to the Covenant's plasma pistol. The light rifle is a rifle used for long range. It fires single shots and can zoom in for more precise aiming. The incinerator cannon fires explosions that send out smaller waves of other explosions. It is similar to a rocket launcher. Did you notice the problem with all these weapons? They aren't that unique. They look more unique than they act. Fundamentally, there are no differences between using a suppressor and an assault rifle or a scatter shot and a shotgun. They are basically more alien versions of the same weapons that you have been using in the previous games. They're still fun to fire, so this is not the biggest problem in the world. Given that this is a new species, I expected something more unique. Then again, maybe I shouldn't, since the Prometheans are, after all, human beings that have been transformed by the composer. As far as the level design goes, you still get large and more open areas to fight enemies in, and the game is at its best when it gives these to the player. Having said that, this is also the most linear game since Halo 2. That is a problem, and I prefer the more open design of a game like Reach to this. But it does not bother me as much as you might think, to be honest. The weapons are so fun to fire, and the combat is so much fun as a direct result, that the linearity of the game really does not bother me as much as it otherwise would. The excellent combat of this game largely makes up for it. What about replay value then? As usual, you get multiple difficulties to play through the game on, which does lend itself some replay value. It does not have skulls in the campaign, but there are terminals to find. I would recommend finding them because it tells the story of the Librarian and the Didact far better than the in-game cutscenes do. I have beaten this game 3 times, and I know it won't be the last. There is multiplayer as well, but I think it's mostly dead. There is also a co-op mode called Spartan Ops, but I'm not sure if you can play through that single player. Good luck finding a game though. Still, I think this game warrants more than one playthrough. Here's the thing, guys. You have seen me heap a ton of praise at this game throughout this review. Don't hate me for this, but this is one of my favorite Halo games. I have beaten it 3 times now, and I thoroughly enjoyed playing through it all 3 times. Despite having some flaws, this game is just so much fun to play through. I thoroughly enjoy it. This is the 3rd game in a row where I have loved it from beginning to end. I would highly recommend you play through this game. Honestly, if you were to combine the superior level design of Halo Reach with the superior combat feel and emotional storytelling of Halo 4 into one game, you would get my perfect Halo game. I can describe the Chief and Cortana storyline to you all day, but it will never have the same impact as if you play through it yourself. Halo 4 is fucking awesome. I love this game and I highly recommend it. Halo 4 does run pretty well on its original hardware. You will mostly get 30 FPS on the Xbox 360, but it is no longer the best way to play it. It was made backwards compatible for the Xbox One and Xbox One X, which means you can play it in upscale to 4K if you have the means. It gives you a constant 30 FPS, the rare dips of the original are eliminated here, and it runs well. This is a good way to play it. You have heard this one before, but the best way to play it is the Master Chief Collection. As of writing this, it is not available on PC yet, but it is coming. The Xbox One version of the game, though, runs at a higher resolution with cleaned up and smoothed over visuals and 60 frames per second. It looks absolutely amazing to play on the Xbox One. On the Xbox One X, you get native 4K with HDR support for the best playing and most visually stunning version of an already beautiful game yet. It feels amazing to play on the Xbox One X, and it looks stunning in 4K. I cannot recommend this enough. Thank you everybody for watching. You are probably expecting my next review to be Halo 5, right? Here's the thing. I have not played Halo 5. For each of the previous Halo games, I had beaten them at least twice before I decided to play through them for review. And I would want to do the same for Halo 5. As such, the next review will not be Halo 5. What will it be? Wait and see. In order to find out, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. Leave a comment below. Do you hate this game like many Halo fans do? Or did you fall in love with it like I did? If you could share this video, that would help me out a lot as well. Talk to you later, everybody. Doomdog out.